Good afternoon and welcome to the latest podcast by me, Voice of the Forge. You can find me on Twitter and on YouTube under that name. Now today, for the 22nd time, I am going to be shooting straight from the lip. And whilst I have mainly contained myself to issues involving online gaming culture and the hashtag known as Gamergate, I feel that there have been times when I could have put a video up, but for one reason or another, time got away with me and the subject matter was no longer topical. Now, today is going to mark a change in that, as for the first time I'm able to produce the video on the same day as something actually being newsworthy, and for a few minutes, because this isn't a topic I usually I don't widely go into politics, but for a short video today I am going to be talking about Jeremy Corbyn and the fact that he has now become leader of the Labour Party. And whilst there has been tides of ink printed in the papers, and there have been God knows how many thousands of words actually reviewing, guessing, and basically trying to ask what would happen with him as the leader, we now have the definitive answer that the other candidates failed spectacularly in their bid to become Labour leader. And whilst he is very much of an old school of socialism, and he has said some interesting things with regard to nationalisation and taking back some of the industries which have been privatised, some of the things that he said about the way in which the country should be run, the fact that he has been mentioned at one point as calling for Tony Blair to be indicted as a war criminal. These things I wouldn't necessarily say I'm not qualified to talk about, because anyone who's read the same pieces would technically be qualified to talk about them, because at the end of the day we're only offering an opinion, and it's not a professional opinion at that. I am a small YouTube channel who basically hopes that what I say is engaging and informative enough that people take something away from it. So I can hardly say that in 10 years' time such and such a scenario will occur, or in 15 years' time we'll face this. One of the biggest fears that people have, and by people I mean the BBC, is that Corbyn will actually be one of the leaders of the No campaign to stay in Europe. Should we stay or should we go? Now, it's interesting to note that there has been a groundswell of popular opinion against the European Union for the past 6 months or so, which is now coming to a head in a different direction because of the refugee crisis, and the fact that we have people who are travelling from places like Turkey, which isn't a hostile or dangerous country in the same terms that Syria and some North African countries are, and they are making the crossings into Europe, places like Greece, Kos, Lesbos, Italy, and yes, we have had people die, and it is saddening. However, I am going to be controversial for a moment and point out that the picture that has been spread around the world with the little boy who's died, it is now coming to light that his father may have actually been the actual driver of the boat, and he may himself have been a people smuggler. Now, the thing is, there is a saying about a lie can travel halfway around the world by the time truth gets its shoes on, and I think this could well be a case here. We've seen what the media narrative can do in Gamergate with actually pushing a narrative which doesn't reflect the truth. And another thing that I've noticed, and what was the main thrust of what I was going to talk about, and I have talked about other things in quite a wide-ranging context here, is the fact that Sky News has actually run a piece on what has happened in the Labour Party with the election of Jeremy Corbyn to Labour leader. But the BBC haven't. The BBC have been quite silent on this matter. And the matter that is the primary focus for concern, and the reason why it makes it so difficult to predict what the future will hold for UK Labour, is the fact that no fewer than 8 shadow cabinet ministers have resigned. This is the biggest number of resignations from a shadow cabinet ever. And they have done it in protest at Jeremy Corbyn being made leader. Now, I can remember the hilarity which ensued when the BBC had its exit polls completely wrong all the way through the final week running up to the election. And then when we held the election in May, the exit poll was proven right. We had people like Paddy Ashdown saying that he would heat his hat. And the shock wave that went through the political establishment by the real drubbing that the pollsters got, as well as the actual parties themselves who lost seats, was profound. And people were trying for weeks afterwards to understand what had gone wrong in terms of the polls, in terms of the way people voted, and the fact that the pollsters got it so completely, utterly wrong. And in the wake of this, 3 opposition party leaders resigned. Now, one, Mr. Farage, he resigned, and then he was basically told that he couldn't by his party. And other people have jumped on the bandwagon saying, oh yes, he resigned, but he didn't really, blah, blah, blah. He turned round and he said that he resigned, and if the party had accepted his resignation, he would be, as such, put out to grass. The fact that the party then turned round and went no isn't really down to him. Now, it could be argued that Nigel Farage knew that the party wouldn't back his resignation, and therefore it was little more than a soundbite. It was more than an offering to say, yes, I'm prepared to stand down with regards to the failure of the UKIP parliamentary party to actually make a dent in the numbers of MPs that it held. But that isn't what the party decided, and I know that I'm skimming over a lot of detail. The whole point is that if I were to go into the detail, I could make videos hours long just on some small technical points, and I try to be a little bit more approachable, breaking the barriers down to make things informative and yet not too technical, that kind of thing. So I'm hitting a middle ground between fact and the actual goings on. The word escapes me right now, which is a crying shame. But the whole point was that you had the Labour leadership resign, you had UKIP resign, and the Lib Dems resigned. They all 3 of them lost their major heads of the leaders of the party, and that was widely reported on because that was a day which was a body blow for politics. It was something that made people stand up, sit up, and take note and go, what on earth has happened here? And we have another one of those things today, with Jeremy Corbyn being elected Labour leader party. Leader of the Labour Parliamentary Party, and the fact that the majority of his shadow cabinet have resigned, most of which are that were career politicians, bear in mind, that they've resigned, I think is yet another bombshell, yet another body blow that should be out there letting people know that it's happened, and should be therefore widely reported. But we're finding it on Sky News, we're finding it tucked away behind a paywall, which is effectively what cable TV is. People have to pay to access these services. And once again, the national voice of the media for the people in the UK, which we have to pay a licence fee for to be able to watch without threat of incarceration. It's a criminal offence to not pay your TV licence. Once again, they have covered over the fact that something earth-shaking, earth-moving in the political sphere has been ignored. They have not reported on this in any way, shape or form, and they're not talking about it at all. And it is this that we have to remember, that we're trying, as part of Gamergate, to rail against. Now, you could turn around and say, well, leadership party politics and UK politics isn't what we're looking at as part of Gamergate. But I am a firm believer that the things that Gamergate stand for transcend gaming politics, gaming culture, games played. It looks at the media as a whole, and for a year we have had a media narrative, a media spin, which has painted us as misogynistic, hateful trolls, and they have denied the opposite side of things. They've denied the other side of the story and shut it down. And here we have yet another instance of a media conglomerate spinning a narrative, ignoring facts that don't fit what they want to come out with, and it's another nail in the coffin for journalism which speaks to people about all sides of an issue. They have literally ignored what possibly is the biggest story in the leadership campaign about the shadow cabinet basically turning around and saying, see ya, I'm not tolerating this, I'm off, goodbye. And I think this is something which needs to be looked at, it needs to be registered, and it needs to be bruited about. Otherwise we end up with nothing more than 1984 and the memory holes of things that don't fit narratives, and narratives crafted to a purpose, which at the end of the day is interchangeable between three separate entities, because none of it means anything, because it's malleable, interchangeable, and falsified. And on that note, seeing as I've now managed to go on for far longer than I thought I was actually going to be, I am going to sign off. And if you wish to leave any comments, either on YouTube channel itself or on Twitter, I am, as always, at Voice of the Forge. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that I can inform and entertain you again in the future. Thank you.